All right, I'm going to start us off with a welcome. Welcome to all of you. I want to welcome you, obviously, to our big event, which is a kickoff of our first inaugural and many, hopefully to come, Real Estate Strategies Conference here at Marquette University. I have to tell you, for those of us who were on the planning committee, just looking out and seeing all these faces, all these tables, we have a sellout crowd today. And I don't know where Andy is, but I think we're close to 300, which as of 2 weeks ago, one other thing about real estate professionals, we tend to procrastinate. And so 10 days ago, we weren't quite sure how we were going to make our numbers, but obviously we did. Thank you so much. Also, in seeing the sellout crowd, 10 days ago, we were like, should we maybe add Coach Buzz Williams onto the program? Then we'll get the full sellout crowd. We didn't have to do that. You came anyway. So thank you. My name is Betty Bell, and I am the chair of the advisory board for the Center for Real Estate here at Marquette University. I also am the director of marketing at Pabst Farms Development, which is a master plan community in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. And I promise to stop there because I'm in marketing and I do like to sell. There's a lot of people that I really do want to thank for all their efforts to make this conference possible. I can start with the board, our advisory board, our staff, and the corporate sponsors that were so giving in helping this conference really happen. But we're going to actually recognize all of you a little bit later in the program. On behalf of the advisory board, what I do want to do is thank all of you who did come out in these great numbers and showed us your support. We really, really appreciate it. In return, I think today we're going to offer you what I think is a pretty exciting program. Starting off with our keynote speaker, Tom McDonald from Equity International. He's going to be keeping in theme with our overall program, which is really about how do you plan long-term in a short-term business environment. And what do we mean? What we're really talking about is the pressures of coming up with the short-term decisions, the short-term pivot moves in order to what? In order to meet the challenges that constantly bombard us in the marketplace. On top of that, we've got what? Global turmoil going on in the economy. We've got fiscal cliffs. We've got monetary cliffs. And if Washington doesn't get their act together, we're going to have a tax-mageddon by the end of the year. So we've got a lot of challenges. And what Tom's going to talk to us about, he's actually going to pull the veil apart a little bit so we can all take a peek inside Equity International and find out what are the insights, how does this company plan for the future, and how does it stay a winner. After Tom's presentation, we've got two excellent panel discussions for you today. One is going to focus on equity investor strategies, and that's going to go across the whole spectrum of small, medium, and large commercial property firms. And the other one, frankly, I think is topical for today. We're going to be kind of weighing in on space utilization trends. What we're finding is space usage is changing rapidly, whether we're talking retail sectors, whether we're talking office sectors, and really it brings up the whole issue of, are we looking at space obsolescence? And if we are, what are the strategies that owners and tenants can employ to make sure that they don't go obsolete? We're then going to cap things off with what I think is the highlight of the program. As many of you know, we are celebrating a milestone here within our real estate program. It's our 10-year anniversary. And so we're going to do a tribute not only to the program, but to the person who's really been so key to our success, which is, of course, Mark Epley. And I'm hoping today we're going to have a fireside chat where I think all of you are going to get to know Mark a whole lot better. And the plan is we're going to have Mark chatting with a former student. And as I thought about this on my drive up today, I thought, you know what? Was that really such a good idea? because I never found out what grade that student got from Mark in his real estate development class. That might have been a good thing to find out first, but we'll all be in for that. We're going to conclude with what I can tell this crowd likes to do best, and that's a whole lot of talking and networking. So I hope you can all stay for that last hour. So that's the program. But before we kick things off, I thought it would be good for all of you to know kind of a sense of what we do here with our real estate program and with the Center for Real Estate. And I'm going to start with mission. You know, the fact is, and some of you may or may not know this, Marquette is the only Jesuit university in the country with a commercial real estate program. So you say to yourselves, well, what's so big about that? Well, I think what's big about it is the kind of students that we're putting out of our program are all about a mission. And the mission is about being the difference to make a difference. Being a difference to make a difference, not just in the business communities that our graduates eventually work for, but it's also about making a difference in the communities that surround our school, trying to make those communities a better place to live and work. And that's the challenge we give our students. I think the other thing, we had a board meeting actually here this morning, and we talked a lot about how do you differentiate a program, like our real estate program here. What really makes us distinct? And I think the corollary becomes, what is our brand identity? Who are we? Who do we want to be known for? And we all came to the same conclusion. It's about our focus on applied learning. Sure, other schools may have applied learning programs, but I have to say, over the 10 years that we've been at this, we really are about applied learning. We are about providing opportunities to our students, not just in the classroom, but importantly, outside of the classroom. And so it's through case competitions, it's through site visits, it's through presentations to industry people like yourselves, where our students really get a sense of what it is to be working in real estate. And I think we give them an outlet for their creative energies, for their problem-solving skills, for their leadership skills, so it all comes into play. And we really, really think that's important. The other thing that makes that all happen is our career center, is our Center for Real Estate. And I would describe it to you as world-class. And I'm sure you're thinking, you know, she's known for hyperbole. But really, we had an accrediting team come through here last fall. They go across the country. They look at universities, they look at centers, and they came into our College of Business Administration for one reason, and that was to evaluate our centers. We have 3. Real estate is 1. And when they left, they described us as what? World-class, truly a model for centers across the country. And so when we asked them why, they really came down to the same set of descriptions, meaning you are about the students. You are truly student-centered. Yes, you have research. Yes, that's important. But at the end of the day, your center does what it's supposed to do, and that's to give those students opportunities in the real world. And so, had it not been for our founding members several years ago who had the foresight to say, you know what, to really make our applied program work here at Marquette, we really need a center. And the center became the liaison between the students, the business community, and really those benefits flow in both directions. The final thing I want to talk about, favorite topic, is placement. You're probably all aware that half of college real estates today either are unemployed or underemployed. And we look at our program, based on our graduates this year, we didn't only place some of our graduates, we didn't place many of our graduates, we placed all of our graduates, 100%. I don't think you're going to find too many other programs out there that have done that. And more than just 100% placement, we place them in real estate related fields. So, people ask, well, how can that be? And I would submit two things. One, it's the quality of our students. It's our program that gets them prepared. When they graduate, they are what we like to say, shovel ready, ready to go. And the third thing is, it's the business community and the ties that we have developed with all of you that have made it so important to be able to place our graduates. So that's a little bit about the program. I want to turn now to the face of the program, Dr. Mark Epley, tell you a little bit about him. Normally, this would be a very simple deal. However, he just took on recently a new role. He is serving as the interim dean for the College of Business Administration, no small job, and he is retaining and serving the Bell Chair of Real Estate at the same time. He's also director of the Real Estate Center. So this is a guy that's been working pretty hard. That's not all. In January, he took on another assignment. He became a board member of the Federal Home Loan Bank in Chicago, and he also serves on the board of the Local Initiative Support Group, LISC, here in Milwaukee. He's widely published, and he's a recipient of several national awards. I have to say, I'm not sure he's going to be able to pick up those awards anymore in person. He's too busy. And the final thing I'll tell you about him is he is a passionate guy when it comes to real estate. He's a real estate guy, and he loves to be a road warrior. He loves going on the road. He loves speaking to people like you, organizations, happy to do it. And in-house, we call him affectionately the rock star. So it is now my pleasure to introduce the multifaceted, the multitasking, Dr. Mark Epley. Get these out of the way.
Thanks, Betty. That was Betty Bell. She's the chair of the Board of Advisors for the Center for Real Estate. And I am delighted to be welcoming you in my new dual role as Interim Keys Dean of the Business School and Bell Chair in Real Estate. And Mike Wanizek, for your information, not only do I know your past grades, I can affect your past grades by having unfettered access to grade change forms in my new role. So ask what you may of me in that little fireside chat. In my new role as the interim dean, or this dual role, I'm not stepping away completely from real estate at all. It does mean I've broadened my role within the College of Business and narrowed my role a little bit within the real estate area. But as you will see in the coming weeks, I continue to teach in the College of Business. I'll be presenting for Interim again. We have a great lineup, or a great idea for the Biz Times Conference in November as well as I continue to take time to have beers with my students and their employers, so that I celebrate. But anyway, we'll talk about a lot of that in the future as well. I'm delighted to be here with you, and I'm delighted to see we have 280 folks here today. I'd like to quickly move on, though, and introduce the keynote speaker, Tom McDonald. Mr. McDonald has 15 years of real estate experience and 25 years of international investment experience. Most recently, Mr. McDonald served as Chief Strategic Officer at Equity International and has had that role since its inception in 1999. As Chief Strategic Officer, Mr. McDonald's responsibilities included building and optimizing the company's partner relationships. Prior to joining Equity International, Mr. McDonald served in several roles with Annixter International and Quadrum SA, spending several years in Buenos Aires in Mexico City. He is fluent both in Spanish and in Portuguese and has lived and worked in Latin America. Mr. McDonald received his Bachelor's of Arts in International Relations and Spanish from the University of Notre Dame, and has an MBA from the Chicago Booth School of Business. We welcome our keynote speaker for the 2012 Marquette University Real Estate Strategies Conference, Thomas McDonald.
I didn't know whether to, what kind of audience to expect. I didn't anticipate hostile, given my university roots. But thanks, Mark. Thanks, Bob, Andy, John, for inviting me. I had no hesitation accepting the invitation to speak today with you here at Marquette. I have very fond memories of Marquette, and coming back, I played rugby at Notre Dame. Remember playing up here. It looks like a completely different campus. And as I was told, the way to change the campus is very easy. You go to the Final Four, you get a bunch of money, you rebuild the campus, you establish a real estate center, and then you move the chair of the real estate center to the business school. And I applaud the administration here for recognizing that if they want to get the business school on the right track, bring in a real estate guy to fix it and get it going. So I think it bodes well for real estate here at Marquette, no doubt about it. So thank you very much for the invitation. What I'd like to do is speak, as we mentioned, about long-term investing in a short-term market environment, which when I read the title, I said, okay, I think I understand it. And then the more I thought about it, the less I understood. Because from my perspective, real estate investing requires conviction, requires understanding what's going on in the markets, and usually it requires a longer view. And so I'll try to incorporate the short-term environment into my words, but I'm sure the folks behind me will do a much better job at incorporating long-term and short-term markets. What I'd like to do is talk about our experience, and I apologize up front. My bias is going to be more international than domestic, and hopefully, again, my colleagues will be able to balance that for you so you get a very global perspective. But my bias has been international investing and international business for 25 years. So I could speak with more conviction and more experience about Buenos Aires than I can about Buena or Benoit, whatever we call that town up here. Hopefully it will be interesting to you. But I'd like to talk about what to do, how to do it, with whom to do it, where and why to do it, and then some of the tools that hopefully will all help us prepare to do a good job long-term investing with this short-term market perspective. What are the things that you have to kind of drill down through when you're thinking about investing? One of the first things we think about is liquidity, okay? Liquidity equals value. To the extent that you have the opportunity to have a liquid market, whether it be in assets, whether it be in securities, portfolios, or operating companies, that's going to determine your appetite for investing. We've got investors along the way that have been everywhere from retail through the large pension funds. And the capital profile of those investors is also a determining factor. You have some investors who have the ability or the need to have liquidity and churn and be able to provide returns for their shareholders or constituents in a shorter term time period. And you've got others, again, like the larger U.S. and foreign pension funds, that actually prefer a longer, much longer, 10, 20, 30-year investment horizons for their investments because their business is matching up their assets and liabilities. And so the longer they can lock into a higher return business or opportunity above their liabilities, the better. Volatility of appetite of volatility. So again, with the bias towards emerging markets, you, by even considering to be investing globally, you have to have a thicker stomach than you would have here in the U.S. By definition, as you branch out of the developed markets, there is higher volatility. You have to expect changes. You have to build those changes into your model, into your return expectations, and expect them, and expect the unexpected. From a stock picker to an investor, speculator to an investor, that's more of a short-term versus long-term view as well. An investor, in our view and experience, has to have conviction and, again, the willingness to go through bumps along the road and the expectation to go through bumps along the road in order to ride it out. Whereas a stock picker or a speculator can actually ride things that very short, on a very short leash and expect to do well. Last but not least, the risk profile is going to be determinant. The higher the risk, the more length you're going to want to have to allow your self-protection. How to do this? Trying to simplify it, there are really three ways. Through assets, and again, these can be either existing assets or assets under development. But either way, we think that at the asset level, there's more of a limited upside and certainly a lower risk. What do I mean by that? If you were to acquire an office building in Kiev or Kalamazoo, it has some kind of rental occupancy. You can increase that occupancy. Perhaps you can increase the rate a bit. Perhaps you can improve the debt terms. And perhaps, if all that goes well, as well, you get some cap rate compression, which would allow for a relatively good return. But all of those have limits. In terms of the assets, and again, on the development side, you can have some more development risk and certainly some benefit on the return there. More conventional structures, assets are traded pretty openly, again, relatively speaking, around the world. And as a result of those first 2 points, there are relatively low barriers to entry. You have local players as well as foreign players coming in. In terms of marketable securities, by definition, they're more liquid. The real estate industry as a whole globally is following the U.S. The U.S. led, I would say, the evolution of real estate from private, mom and pop, really non-transparent industry in the 40s and 50s, and then has kind of evolved to where it is today. The rest of the world is behind, and depending on what country you might pick, close behind or far behind. The products are emerging. In the case of Brazil, for example, in 2007, there were 3 home builders listed on the Bovespa, which is the exchange in Brazil. Today, there are 22. The right number is somewhere in between. I would say probably perhaps 6 or 7. But the point is that there are more options as time progresses for people, institutions, retail to play in the marketable securities. By far the easiest access, but again, depending on what market you're talking about, things may be more or less transparent than you're used to here in the United States. The last manner through which you can play is the operating company, and that's one that we have a bias toward. We believe that investing in operating platforms, real estate related, allows you unlimited upside. And what do I mean by that? We would invest and look for leading companies in sectors, in markets, whether it be shopping centers, finance companies, logistics companies, home builders, that were in the process of building a business. In the case of one of our investments, at the time we invested, they were building 1,000 homes a year. These are small 40, 60-meter homes in Mexico. And we paid an entry multiple of about 4.5 times of EBITDA. Over the next couple years, we helped build that company to where when we listed that company on the exchange, it was building 15,000 homes a year, and we listed it at 7.5 times EBITDA, and then sold over the next couple years and ultimately exited when they were building 50,000 homes a year. That's the unlimited upside and value creation opportunity that operating companies represent. Now, it's not easy. It's the most difficult, highest risk way to get it done, and we often are accused of being masochists for trying to take this kind of activity on, but we believe that, again, if you have conviction, if you look for markets and segments and companies where there is a clear demand fundamentals and clear growth opportunities, that's half the battle. So we would say it's worth the effort, but certainly not for the faint of heart. With whom? Real estate's a local business. You all know that. It's local here in Milwaukee. It's local everywhere you go. On the asset side, anywhere you go, you're going to have service providers, the CBs, the Jones Langs, the Cushmans of the world. Speaking internationally, they're good businesses because they've got a global reach, and generally speaking, they're reliable and can function as global organizations. The downside is that on the asset side, as an owner or an investor, typically it's transaction-based kind of activity, and therefore you don't have necessary alignment of interests on the economics. Example of that would be even on the hotel side. If you were to own a hotel and you've got a management company that's providing reservations and property management, they're going to want you to make capital improvements so that you can have a higher room rate and therefore pay a higher fee to them, although it may not be economically the best idea to do. On the enterprise side, focus all of our efforts on finding right partners that have local knowledge and have a proven track record. And then what you work on, and again, this takes years to do, is create visions with them on what to do with these businesses and how to build them and how to build the business. And align yourself with folks that have their net worth tied up in the business, have spent their careers in the business, and are sharing the vision with you. If you're able to do that and find these opportunities, you've, again, at least got half the battle. Where and why? And again, my bias towards emerging markets, but in speaking with Mark last week, you know, we always look for strong demand fundamentals and growth. And depending on whether you look 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, there are parts of that kind of, or those fundamentals in different parts of the world. Today, it's very, very difficult to get excited about growth here in the US. It's even challenging to get excited about growth in Western Europe. Where we see the opportunities are places like Brazil, places like China, places like India, places like Colombia, where the amount of real estate that exists to support what's happening in those countries is anywhere between 1% to 5% than would exist in a developed market like the US. So when we talk about the attractive characteristics, they're very basic. I mean, our view is life's difficult to run a business and make money in the normal state of play, even with demand and growth. If you don't have that, you're setting yourself up for a much more difficult game at it. So we focus where the growth is there and the demand is there, and really focus our efforts on execution. So the growing youthful population and what that means, the expanding middle class and consumerism, whether that means home construction, whether that means finance, mortgage origination, logistics, shopping. You know, places like Brazil have less than 5% of the GLA per capita, par to par on economic demographics that the U.S. do. Stable governments that help provide stable monetary policy, rule of law, currency, go a big way to create interesting opportunities. Exports, supply-demand relationships across all the sectors, as I mentioned, and then last but not least, inefficient capital markets. I think some of us may take it for granted that think that real estate lending, for example, around the world is as it is here in the U.S., and I can tell you that's not the case. Even in Brazil today, the lending is similar to what it was in the United States in the 1940s or 50s. Even today, we built a couple years ago through one of our companies the best office building in Rio de Janeiro. It was a built-to-suit for Petrobras, the Brazilian oil company. 15-year bulletproof lease with extensions. The bank would only provide 15-year fully amortizing debt, okay? No residual value for arguably the best building in Rio, if not all of Brazil. That's the state of play today. We know that that's going to evolve, but those are both challenges and opportunities for this kind of activity elsewhere. The downside, of course, is that each of these countries represents risks, whether they be challenges on the political side, the social side, the tax side, and the challenge is being able to navigate those risks. And going back to the earlier slide, the partners are key to that. And again, would be whether you're doing things either at the asset level or the entity level. The tools. This is a slide that I saw presented by the president of Thunderbird, which I thought was a great slide. I've tweaked it a little bit, but always make sure to give him credit because I'd never seen on a piece of paper some ways to help describe the tools that folks can use. Now, this isn't only if you're parachuting into Paris or elsewhere. This is also can be very useful if you're dealing with folks from the other countries in the U.S. And as I was told by someone at a speech a couple months ago, an American woman came up to me and said, "This is going to help me even dealing with my husband." I said, "Well, that's interesting. Where's your husband from?" And she said, "France." And I said, "Well, I think you're going to need a lot more than this page to help you with that. But whatever help we can provide, I'm happy to do that." But kind of break it down into intellectual capital, psychological capital, and social capital. The intellectual capital is the gray matter that we've got, business savvy, cognitive complexity, being able to look at things, process them, form a view, and then be able to articulate that view. Cosmopolitan outlook, which sounds maybe, I don't know, too cosmopolitan, but at least being able to look at the world and understand that things outside can be okay, can be respectful, can be better than things that are where you're from. On the psychological capital, a passion for diversity, an appreciation for adventure, and being confident enough where you don't need to be in your comfort zone. Some people are okay with that, others aren't. And then on the social capital, empathy from a intercultural perspective, understanding what you're comfortable with, but also what's important for others, and being able to get through that. The interpersonal impact of getting along, which sounds again very, very trite, but you'd be surprised how when you travel, or again when you see people interacting here with folks outside the U.S., you can see where some people have an ability to naturally flow and interact. And last but not least, diplomacy, which of course is an important part of any marriage as well. I hope that this, again, is useful to put in context, to list a little bit of the tools that are helpful. I think that, again, the long-term investment opportunities, which we'll talk about, I know, in a couple of the panels, the space discussion, I think, is very interesting, where here in the U.S., we have an abundance of space, and actually looking to either retrofit or refit or find other uses for space. That's not the kind of challenge that exists in a lot of the emerging markets today. In the emerging markets, it's the opposite. There's a lack of institutional space. Why? Because there haven't been institutional owners. There hasn't been the fundamental institutional financing available to build. And last but not least, you haven't had the international client demand that now has changed. And they've adopted, typically, again, from the U.S., not owning the bricks and mortars, but realizing that those shouldn't be on the balance sheet. The capital should be deployed to the core business, and that's filtering down and creating not only a need, but an ability to satisfy those corporate needs elsewhere. I hope these words were somewhat helpful and somewhat on point in terms of the long-term opportunity of investing, the long-term risks associated with investing, and managing that with the short-term market situations. But again, our view is real estate's capital intensive. It's going to be here for a long time. It has been here. The United States benefits in being the forefront of what's happened, and I think the opportunity for us is to learn and leverage that experience. So thank you very much. And if any questions or comments, be glad to answer. Yes?
How do you assess the political risk from market to market?
Very good questions. We have.
There's politics, there's financial, currency valuation. So do you measure that and have competing countries on your grid and then selecting one over the other based on that risk factor?
It's a good question, and there's a couple of parts to the answer. The first part is political risk, specifically. We have a couple dents in the car. And this may be interesting, when we started in 1999, I remember asking about Colombia, because I had traveled in a previous life and had very good commercial success in Colombia, despite the headlines and what was I would say then, a relatively accurate depiction of the market. Colombia was off limits. It was toxic. If you went to General Motors pension fund and mentioned Colombia, they'd run for the doors. At that time, Venezuela was in good standing. We invested in Venezuela, and only because of our partner were we able to exit Venezuela. We invested in 2000 and exited our investment in 04 with about 70% of our capital, which all of our investors were amazed. They thought it was a complete wash. Fast forward 13, 14 years, now Venezuela's toxic, and Colombia is the hidden gem of Latin America. When we invested in Venezuela, every political risk expert supported our investment. There was no way to quantify a ruler like Chavez coming in, changing the currency, nationalizing assets, and wiping out what was a burgeoning business. So that's a dent in the car. Now, thanks to having a great partner, we were able to get most of our capital back. On the currency side, there are a couple parts. Number one, the investments that we make have been made in dollars, but they're invested into local companies that generate revenue in local currency. And any debt we would take at the company level in countries in that currency as well. So the currency and the debt and revenues are matched. So our potential currency risk is really at exit. Traditionally, if you look at any major currency devaluations, and knock on wood, there haven't been many in recent past, but if you go back over time, and it's usually 1 to 2 years, inflation will recapture what currency has been lost in an inflation, in a devaluation. And so leases typically are inflation adjusted. So from a revenue perspective, if you had the ability to ride out a devaluation, you'll recover it in 1 to 2 years. On the exit, we'll only hedge when we know a finite date and a finite amount, because other than that, the cost of hedging any large transaction is too high. And I'm sorry to give you all the data, but we spent a lot of time thinking about this. The other thing I would tell you is we did some analysis about 18 months ago and tried to look at everything we've done, all our investments, all of our funds, and break it down into what was things that we could have, that we created and could take credit for, what was the market, and what was currency. And those were 3 buckets that we thought were the best buckets to create. Whether it's right or not, I don't know. But it was interesting because 45% of our return we were able to quantify to the operating businesses themselves, which effectively were what we could control. Whether that was growing EBITDA, whether it was growing top line, whatever, but it was operating growth. The other 45% was on the public's multiple expansion or cap rate compression, which are factors outside of our control. And 10% was currency. Throughout 20 investments, 15 years, 20 countries, 8 or 9 countries. So we appeared to play the currency game okay, and sorry for the long answer. Yep.
Tom, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you mentioned that assets are traded readily internationally. I'm curious, is the velocity down? Has it picked up from the last cycle? And
You know,
it depends on where you're at.
yeah, and I do mean relatively liquid to the U.S. Western Europe is as liquid and immature, I would say, as the U.S. I've heard, but I don't know because we don't spend any time in Western Europe, that things are beginning to trade. They haven't come out of the banks yet, which is similar to the U.S., the when and if. It's been more extend and pretend, still on the lending side, so product, it hasn't come from the banks. But there's some activity. In places like Brazil, for example, what's happened is that there have been some other products that have been developed on the capital market side where assets are being brought in through syndication, and then those assets sold on the market, as opposed to one institutional buyer coming in. So there was a point on one of the slides that the evolving products, that's what I meant by that, is other means by which assets can be sold. Anybody else? Well, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the day.